Tonight at 10, relatives win their 50-year fight to clear the names of 10 people, almost all of them killed by the British Army during the Troubles in Northern Ireland. A coroner rules that all 10 were entirely innocent people. A Catholic priest and a mother of 8 were among those who died in Ballymurphy in 1971. They were killed during street violence that erupted after an operation by the army to detain paramilitaries without trial. A woman who lost her mother expressed her fury after the ruling.
The parachute regiment only had hate in their hearts when they gunned down her and the others. They were not peacemakers. They were not brave soldiers. They were nothing but cowards.
Also on the programme tonight, the state opening of Parliament. The Queen carries out her first major public engagement since the death of the Duke of Edinburgh, as she outlines the government's plans for the year ahead. An Israeli airstrike hits a tower block in Gaza. Residents had been warned they should leave amid another surge in fighting between Israel and Hamas militants. A large number of rockets are fired back from Gaza. One hits a suburb in Tel Aviv. Manchester City are crowned Premier League champions once again after Manchester United lose to Leicester at home.
We've got an audience, we've got dancers, we've got pop stars, we are back!
And no masks, no social distancing, just a negative test is the ticket required for 4,000 people at tonight's Brit Awards in London.
And also in the sports on the BBC News channel.
Good evening. 50 years after they died, a coroner has ruled that 10 people who were killed in Belfast in 1971, almost all of them by British soldiers, had been entirely innocent. A Catholic priest who was helping the wounded and a mother of 8 children were among those killed over the course of 3 days during street violence which erupted in Ballymurphy after an operation by the British Army to detain paramilitary suspects without trial. Today, the families of those who were killed finally won their long fight to clear the names of their relatives as the coroner criticised the army for using disproportionate force. Our Ireland correspondent Emma Vardy reports.
Northern Ireland's past continues to be carried into its present. A fresh inquest into the deaths of the Ballymurphy victims was brought about by their families' campaign. Today marked the culmination of a 50-year search for truth. In 1971, the army went into a housing estate in the Ballymurphy area of West Belfast to arrest and imprison IRA suspects without trial, known as internment.
The main target of the present operation is the Irish Republican Army, which has been responsible for recent acts of terrorism and whose victims have included Protestant and Catholic alike.
It sparked violent clashes over 3 days. By the end, 10 people lay dead. Among them, a local priest and a mother of 8. Soldiers from the parachute regiment, now given anonymity, claimed they opened fire after being attacked by IRA gunmen and rioters.
I saw this chap with a petrol bomb in his hand. I opened my cab door and I fired one round from a gun. It's a submachine gun. Fired it at him. He dropped.
You killed him?
I think so, yeah. Well, I know so now. I found out later on.
Soldiers at the time said those killed were armed. Their relatives always maintained they were innocent civilians. These were the people who died. Today, the coroner acknowledged the army had come under fire from gunmen in the area, but she concluded in most cases the use of force by the parachute regiment was disproportionate, and that all of those killed were entirely innocent of any wrongdoing. Inside court, relatives had applauded as the findings were read out.
You pray and you pray and you ask for justice.
You got all the detail you were hoping for in that verdict?
Well, we knew, we always knew, but to hear the world will know, the world will know now that, and the world will know. And they're innocent. They're innocent. For all along people would say, oh, they were this and they were that, but now it's all cleared up for us all. Yeah.
The findings bring new clarity to one of the most brutal episodes of Northern Ireland's past. For decades, families felt their loved ones' names were tarred. Today, they've been publicly exonerated.
Today is a great day for our families
but it's also a bittersweet day. Today, personally, I think of my dear brother Frank, whose young life was taken by British paratroopers. He gave his life helping others, and as one of our witnesses said, he was very brave.
The parachute regiment only had hate in their hearts when they gunned down her and the others. They were not peacemakers. They were not brave soldiers. They were nothing but cowards.
The Ministry of Defence said it will review the findings. The former head of the army suggested it may warrant an official apology.
There's no getting away that these 10 deaths should not have happened, and it was poor decision making by a number of soldiers, probably poor leadership at the junior level, operating at a time of great violence amidst a poor strategic policy that led to this, and it is shameful.
On the streets that saw such bloodshed, tonight celebration. There are still hundreds of killings from the Troubles that remain unsolved, but for the families of Ballymurphy, now a new sense of vindication.
Well, today the government announced it was bringing forward new proposals to deal with killings from the Troubles, and it's understood that includes a ban on prosecuting former soldiers and paramilitaries. Now, that will strongly be opposed by all sides here, and as today has shown, there is still a deep sense of feeling in communities in terms of getting justice for loved ones, no matter how many years have passed.
Emma Vardy, thank you. The Queen has unveiled the government's plans for legislation for the year ahead at the state opening of Parliament. It was the Queen's first major public appearance since the death of the Duke of Edinburgh last month, and 30 bills were outlined. They include infrastructure investment around the UK to strengthen economic ties across the Union, laws to support what the government says will be a lifetime guarantee for skills and training. Changes to the planning system to allow more homes to be built will be brought forward, along with binding environmental targets plus plans for long-delayed online safety laws, bringing regulation to the internet to tackle illegal content. Here's our political editor, Laura Kunsberg.
A red letter day round here, preparing for the visit from the monarch, the official new start for this palace. But some of the colour, some of the pageantry, less formal because of COVID. And the lonely crown. The Queen's 67th state opening. The first since Prince Philip passed away. But some of the refrains were the same.
Close the door.
The bang on the door. The Prime Minister's plans. In her voice.
My government will level up opportunities across all parts of the United Kingdom.
The jargon confirmed from the throne. The government wants everyone to have the same chance wherever they live. So, promises on transport, health, education, catching up after the COVID crisis.
My government will strengthen the economic ties across the Union. Legislation will support a lifetime skills guarantee.
And after the emergency, new laws planned since the election manifesto.
Legislation will increase sentences for the most serious and violent offenders and ensure the timely administration of justice. Measures will be brought forward to establish a fairer immigration system that strengthens the United Kingdom's borders.
But as the Queen's first big job since Prince Philip's funeral was over, she left arguments for the government behind. Tory rows on planning, tangles with the opposition over the Constitution, or voters being asked to show ID. Nor was there a speck of detail on how we care for the vulnerable, leaving the opposition deeply unimpressed.
Order! This Queen's speech merely papers over the cracks. It's packed with short-term gimmicks and distant promises. This government's never short of those. But it misses the urgency and the scale of the transformation that's needed.
But the Prime Minister was bullish, fresh from election success.
We must use this opportunity to achieve a national recovery so that jabs, jabs, jabs becomes jobs, jobs, jobs. That is our plan, Mr. Speaker, and to address the decades-old problems that have held us back.
The Tories, though, have had 11 years in charge, not lost on the other parties.
We know the past Westminster has imposed, and we now know the future that it will inflict. Westminster has chosen its future: a job-destroying Brexit, a return to austerity cuts and more attacks and devolution.
Today's most immediately disappointing omission is the government's failure to deliver on its manifesto pledge to reform social care.
After a year of politics as usual being frozen, this Queen's speech is a sign of things getting back to normal. Ministers hope to make progress beyond the pandemic, and the opposition parties perhaps starting to confront reality of dealing with a government with the brute force of a huge majority behind it. Symbols, tradition, so much stays the same, but the only permanent thing in politics is moving on. Laura Kunsberg, BBC News, Westminster.
Well, there were no details on the government's plans to reform social care in England, a sector that's suffering from years of underfunding and greater demand. But it's vital support for adults, particularly those older and disabled, who need help with day-to-day tasks like washing and eating. It's means tested. For instance, adults in care homes have to pay the full cost of social care until their assets, including the value of their home, fall below £23,250. After that, the local authority steps in, though most people still have to make some contribution. Last year, adult social care costs local authorities in England more than £23 billion. Our social affairs correspondent, Alison Holt, has this report.
Terry Jones is 62 and has early onset dementia. Neither he nor his wife Tina know what lies ahead. But in future, they may have to rely on the care system mentioned so briefly in today's Queen's speech. After Terry's diagnosis, they felt on their own.
Who do we see? How do we live? You know, and it was just, we were just going on in circles. And there were so many people like us in the same boat.
Local authorities fund most social care, and they were told to ring back when they were in crisis.
This is how it works, majority of time, until you are actually in crisis. They won't step in, they won't help.
What are your concerns for the future?
Hope that I can do it. Hope that I'm well enough myself and that I can. Sorry. This is a reality of what it is.
We will fix the crisis in social care once and for all.
It's now 2 years since the Prime Minister first promised to reform a system struggling with underfunding and increasing demand. For years, there have been brief mentions of the care system in speeches and promises of change from different governments. That's why there's such deep frustration that yet again they are being told they must wait for detailed plans for reform. In the meantime, hard decisions are being made. This charity-run dementia specialist home in Blackburn is rated outstanding. Most residents are council-funded, but fees don't cover the costs, so the home has been sold. For the manager, who's worked in care for 15 years, it's sadly familiar.
Well, unfortunately, this will be the 5th time throughout my career in social care that this has happened, and purely down to the lack of support and funding. To enable good services, to continue to provide that quality of care.
To balance the home's books, the new private owners will take in more self-funders who pay extra for the same care. For the charity, an uneasy reality.
Social care is something we're just about getting away with at the moment with the austerity that it operates in, but it is breaking at the seams, and for charities like ours to be making decisions like the one that we've just had to make, you know, it is just plain wrong.
The government insists reform will happen, but for many, the question remains when. Alison Holt, BBC News, Blackburn.
The government say they want to spread opportunity equally across the country, a promise that they've been trying to deliver since gaining seats from Labour at the last general election. The next battleground will be Batley and Spen after the constituency's MP Tracy Brabin resigned following her election as the mayor for West Yorkshire. From there, our political correspondent Alex Forsyth reports.
In the heart of Batley, this charity's getting back on its feet after the pandemic. It grows organic food. The focus is providing for the community. and they have a clear idea of what's needed in theirs.
And we need to invest in our own. At the moment, my daughter, she's qualified, but she's looking at jobs in cities. I mean, that's no good.
I think we don't have many opportunities here, and that's why I go elsewhere, into the cities.
Batley was once a thriving textile town. Like many, its economy has slowed, its high streets quietened, jobs are less secure. It's the kind of place being promised a lot by government. Today it was talk of house building and investment in skills. Some born and bred here can see the appeal.
I think it's welcome. It's much needed. There's a lot of communities that have been left behind before the COVID pandemic, and more so communities are going to need a lot more support, help, encouragement in order to provide a better future for communities up and down the country, and Batley is no different.
There is scepticism here though. At the local food bank they see entrenched poverty.
There is a big disparity between areas of the south and areas of the north, and I think areas like this one have suffered tremendously during the periods of austerity since 2010, and a lot of services and facilities have been stripped out of the local community, and they won't come back just like that in a levelling up promise.
These arguments will play out here this summer as the region picks a new MP. It's been Labour for years. It was once the seat of Jo Cox. Almost 5 years since her murder, her legacy's clear. Political memories can run deep. There are those, though, who think this Brexit-backing seat could now turn blue. There'll be a lot riding on the contest here. For the Conservatives, can they convince people they will deliver what they've promised? For Labour, the stakes are much higher. They have to come up with an offer to stop them shedding support in this part of the country, or there'll be more serious questions about where the party's headed. The town's at a crossroads.
I don't think the Conservatives really stand a chance, but that's just me, and I'm hoping they don't anyway.
Batley has always been a Labour stronghold. The times that we're in now, I think it's time for a change.
This is a community weighing up its options, waiting to be convinced. Alex Forsyth, BBC News, Batley.
The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says militants in the Gaza Strip will pay a very heavy price for their belligerence after another day of escalating violence between Israel and the Palestinians. An Israeli airstrike destroyed an apartment block in Gaza City after residents were warned to leave. Tonight, a large number of rockets were fired from Gaza towards the Israeli city of Tel Aviv and its suburbs. At the centre of the latest violence is the Al-Aqsa Mosque in East Jerusalem. The complex where it stands is a highly sensitive site, sacred for both Muslims and Jews. During Ramadan, Palestinians have complained of severe restrictions on the site imposed by Israeli police, who accused rioters of hurling rocks at them. And there were further tensions over a proposal to evict dozens of Palestinians from an East Jerusalem neighbourhood. Our Middle East correspondent Tom Bateman reports on the latest clashes.
A street ablaze on Israel's normally bustling coastline. People run for shelter. Others have a lucky escape. But in a nearby suburb, a woman was killed as a building took a direct hit. In a single barrage, militants fired 130 rockets from Gaza deep into Israel. A clear sign both sides were into a round of steep escalation.
Hamas and Islamic Jihad have paid, and I tell you here, they will pay a very high price for their aggression. I say here tonight, their blood will be on their heads.
Earlier, Israel struck a Gaza tower block, which had been evacuated. It was home to members of the Palestinian militant group Hamas, which warned it would target Tel Aviv if the building was hit. Israeli airstrikes have pounded Gaza. Panic arrives here just after the warplanes. Inside this block, says Israel, 3 militant leaders were killed. Some of the worst fighting in years is leaving lives scattered. Among Gaza's victims, 11-year-old Hussein Hamad. Why did you kill him? Asks Hussein's uncle. They kill, and there is no one to make them answer for it. The whole world is watching. Israel says Hamas is endangering civilians on both sides with its rocket fire. It follows weeks of boiling tensions in Jerusalem, always at the heart of this conflict. But it spilled over at Al-Aqsa Mosque compound with further confrontation before dawn today. With the fighting reaching a fierce level of intensity tonight, both sides are vowing to continue their attacks. Well, tonight the casualty figures on both sides have continued to grow, but it is also the scale of firepower used by militants in the Gaza Strip in a single round reaching deep into the heart of Israel that makes that one of the biggest episodes between the two sides in recent memory. It looks for now like only escalation is possible despite the repeated international calls for calm.
Tom Bateman, thank you. A 9-year-old boy has died after being struck by lightning during a football coaching session in Lancashire tonight. The child was struck on a playing field in the Common Edge Road area of Blackpool shortly after 5 p.m. Lancashire police said he was badly injured and taken to hospital, but did not survive. Boris Johnson has told MPs that a public inquiry into the government's handling of the pandemic could be held within a year. Today's figures show there were 2,474 new COVID infections in the past 24 hours. 20 deaths were recorded. More than 35 million people have now had their first dose of a vaccine. That's over 67% of the UK's adult population. More than 18 million people have had both jabs, so more than 34% of all adults are now fully vaccinated. The UK's financial watchdog has opened an investigation into the collapsed finance firm Greensill Capital. Its founder, the Australian banker Lex Greensill, has been appearing before MPs, speaking publicly for the first time about what happened. He says he takes complete responsibility for its collapse and insists there has been no loss to the British taxpayer. It comes as the Treasury Committee published texts from David Cameron revealing the extent of his lobbying for the firm. Well, our business editor Simon Jack is with me, and there were dozens of texts, more than 40 of them.
Yeah, a blizzard of texts and emails to the most senior people in government and the civil service, lobbying them to grant his employer, Greensill Capital, access to government-backed COVID rescue loans, including right to the top of the Treasury. One of them he said here to Rishi Sunak, it reads, "Hi Rishi, David Cameron here. Can I have a very quick word at some point? Call anytime on this number." And if that didn't work out, just as a backup, he also said to Michael Gove, he says, "Tar, I'm now speaking to Rishi first thing tomorrow morning. If I'm still stuck, can I call you then? Thanks, DC." And a frustrated one to very senior civil servant Tom Scholar saying, again, Greensill have got, I know, I'm genuinely baffled. This seems bonkers because despite his intense efforts, both the Bank of England and the Treasury turned him down. Now, as you mentioned earlier, this afternoon, we also got a rare public view of the man who was paying him to do all this lobbying, Lex Greensill.
Please understand that I bear complete responsibility for the collapse of Greensill Capital. I am desperately saddened that more than 1,000 very hard-working people have lost their jobs at Greensill.
Now, it's not just 1,000 people who worked at Greensill. The collapse of him as middleman between investors on the one side, customers on the other, have left both in the lurch, including the UK's third largest steel maker, Liberty Steel. He said he couldn't comment on the relationship between Greensill and Sanjeev Gupta's Liberty Steel because there's an investigation looking into that relationship which may have criminal allegations in it, allegations they both deny. David Cameron is facing no criminal allegations, but he is facing, I'll say, a very uncomfortable Thursday afternoon when he faces that group of MPs.
Simon Jack, thank you. Police are searching a cafe in Gloucester for the body of a 15-year-old girl who's thought to have been murdered more than 50 years ago by the serial killer Fred West. Mary Bastholm went missing in January 1968 and, despite extensive investigations, has never been found. Officers have been called to the cafe after a production company filming a documentary there said they'd found evidence that a body could be buried at the property. A 21-year-old man has appeared in court charged with the murder of a 53-year-old police community support officer. Julia James was found dead 2 weeks ago near her home in Kent. She'd suffered serious head injuries. John Donnison reports.
Julia James, who disappeared last month after taking her dog for a walk in Woodland in Snowdown in Kent. Today, using an actress and Julia's actual Jack Russell Terrier Toby, police staged a reconstruction of her last known movements. Officers say they've already received more than 1,000 pieces of information from members of the public, but say their investigation is very much ongoing.
I continue to appeal for witnesses. I am confident that there were people in the area at the time that we are yet to speak to. It's absolutely crucial. We have an obligation to piece together exactly what happened in the last moments of Julia's life.
And appearing to gesture to reporters outside court in Chatham this morning, this is the man who police believe killed her, 21-year-old Callum Wheeler from Aylsham. This initial hearing for Callum Wheeler lasted only around 5 minutes. He spoke just to confirm his name, his age and his address. He was remanded in custody and will appear at Maidstone Crown Court on Thursday, charged with Julia James's murder. It's exactly 2 weeks since Julia James's body was found. The case is expected to go to trial early next year. John Donnison, BBC News in Chatham in Kent.
At least 7 children and 2 adults have been killed in a shooting at a school in Russia. More than 20 others were injured, many seriously. Some children jumped out of third-floor windows to try to escape. Police have arrested the suspected attacker, a 19-year-old former pupil. It happened in the southwestern city of Kazan. Our correspondent Steve Rosenberg is there for us now. Steve.
Well, it's midnight in Kazan, but as you can see, a lot of people gathering outside the school. There's a real sense of disbelief of what has happened here. You know, across Russia, children went back to school today after the long May holidays, but students arriving here had no idea of the nightmare that lay in store for them.
A day of learning turned into a day of bloodshed. School number 175 had come under attack. This CCTV footage shows the gunman on his way there, looking completely calm, weapon at the ready. When the shooting began, there was panic. Some children tried to get away by jumping from windows. Others barricaded themselves in classrooms and then escaped this way, down a ladder.
There were screaming children running under your apartment. Children were running on the sports grounds, and they were running to the fence and getting over the fence, screaming, "Oh my God, they're killing us." The little girl screamed, and that was the moment I realized that's not some sort of, accident.
Some of the school children waited inside to be rescued. 10th grader Elisa says she felt stress and panic as she hid in a room. At one point, the gunman had banged on the door. The attacker, former student Ilnaz Galiviev, was eventually arrested. Under interrogation, he's said to have claimed he believed he was God and consumed by hatred. All day, people have been coming to the school to honour the victims. Set up outside this makeshift shrine. Flowers, soft toys, and one Russian word, skorbim, we mourn. What happened here has shocked not only this city, but the entire country. In Russia, school shootings are relatively rare. And in response to this tragedy, President Putin has ordered an urgent review of gun control laws. Kazan is struggling to come to terms with this tragedy. The question you hear most here is why? Steve Rosenberg, BBC News, Kazan.
Manchester City have won their 3rd Premier League title in 4 years after their closest challengers, Manchester United, were beaten tonight by Leicester City. Andy Swiss reports.
Congratulations to Pep Guardiola and Manchester City.
The moment that meant disappointment on one side of Manchester and delight on the other. Defeat for United meant City were champions for the 5th time in less than a decade. For their fans, another night to celebrate.
It's just unbelievable. I think it's Pep's biggest achievement so far.
Nothing beats it, Premier League.
you just know you've won. You're the champions of England.
We won the Carabao Cup, we've won the Premier League. Let's hope we can go to Quincy Champions League as well.
Earlier, United's 2-1 defeat to Leicester had ended their slender hopes of catching City, whose players could celebrate from the comfort of their armchairs, like Aymeric Laporte and rather more grandly Alex Zinchenko, who said it was unbelievable. While Raheem Sterling tweeted, "It's the champions, baby," on an understandably proud night.
Well, here inside the Etihad, City have played some stunning football this season, but of course none of their fans have been able to watch it. Every game here has been behind closed doors, but it hasn't stopped their success.
Because even, I think it was January, February time, when you see Kevin De Bruyne go down, you see Sergio Aguero go down, they're two of the best players in the world. But in that time, I think City won every single game. So I think that says a lot about the collective.
And so City's decade of domestic domination now has a new chapter. And with the first Champions League final to come, it could be their greatest yet. Andy Swiss, BBC News, the Etihad Stadium.
4,000 people are at London's O2 Arena tonight for the Brit Awards. No face masks, no social distancing, all part of the government's research to help events return to normal. Colin Patterson reports.
A duo win for Dua Lipa. She performed with 50 dancers, gave a nod to Geri Halliwell with her dress, and won both Best Female and Album of the Year for Future Nostalgia. Released last March during the very first week of lockdown, her modern take on disco became the soundtrack to many people's year at home.
In 2018, I said that I wanted to see more women on these stages, and I feel so proud that 3 years later we're seeing that happen. Little Mix!
It was a night dominated by women, winning 4 of the 5 mixed categories. After 10 years together, Little Mix became the first all-female lineup in Brits history to be named Best Group.
It's not easy being a female in the UK pop industry. We've seen the white male dominance, misogyny, sexism and lack of diversity.
While a live highlight was Elton John's duet with Ollie Alexander from the Channel 4 AIDS drama It's a Sin.
It's a sin.
The Brits are part of the government's pilot scheme to help live music return. To gain entry tonight, everyone had to provide a negative COVID test, both the audience...
Negative. Clear. Negative.
...and the stars.
Sticks a swab right down the back of your neck and you're a little bit.
Not your normal preparation for the Brit Awards, is it?
No, not really.
More than 4,000 mask-free fans were inside, with half the tickets going to COVID frontline staff.
These gorgeous faces belong to none other than key workers. Such a pleasure to have you in the room tonight.
And if this event helps bring about the return of live music to the UK, then all fans will be the winner. Colin Patterson, BBC News, London's O2 Arena.
A glimpse of normality. That's it from us. Good night.